The logistics implications are actually quite significant. We see that renewable energy requires a lot more logistics compared to, for example, thermal power. Logistics assets are more spread out, more dispersed, and often more in more remote locations. So, for example, if you have a thermal gas turbine of 500 megawatt, to match that with solar energy, you would need almost a few million solar panels or a few thousand containers of solar panels. And in the case of wind, you will need a few hundred wind turbines, which requires very significant logistic support to install. If you then look at maintenance, solar doesn't require much maintenance, but in the case of wind, where you actually convert mechanical power into electricity, it does require a lot of maintenance, and with the maintenance comes delivery of parts and tools, etc. Yeah, that's very likely to reach the UN climate goals. There's an estimated 10 trillion of new investment needed in renewable energy to support the climate goals. Today already we see that for new capacity, renewable energy is quite competitive to other energy forms, and as a result, last year the majority of new capacity was renewable energy in power production. The costs are expected to go further down, and due to recent policy changes in China, the estimated fall in price for solar is 34%. That's very significant. So if we see that type of trend continuing, then at some point renewable energy will not only be cost competitive with additional capacity, but even with existing capacity. So it might be cheaper to replace a thermal power plant with renewable energy instead of keep on running it. The supply chains of energy companies, but also for their equipment providers, will be affected in several ways. We experience that energy companies, they have very strong procurement functions, and as a result of that, the supply chains are often run by the contracting entities separately or by the operating entities. But when assets become very distributed, they will very likely move to a more networked model, and we see that already happening when they're gonna consolidate materials management, inventory, and organize that more in a networked environment rather than by operating or contracting entity. That could be the case in some specific examples. So, for example, energy companies, they have a vast experience in running very complex supply chains in remote locations and offshore as well. So, looking at offshore wind, to run offshore supply chains on a large scale, there are very few organizations that have, or very few industries that have that type of experience. And in fact, today we already see that some of the largest operators in offshore wind do have an history in oil and gas. So there are definitely some transferable skills from oil and gas companies for renewable energy, and also because of their supply chain capabilities. Yeah, there will be some very significant consequences for the logistics industry. If we look at the energy transition, it's well on its way in the power sector, but if we look at the transport sector, only 3% of energy is renewable energy, and of that 3%, it's almost all of it is biofuel. So one thing that needs to be done is probably more integration and sector coupling between the transport sector and, for example, the power sector to achieve further adoption of renewable energy in our logistics industry. One way to do that is to electrify transport, and in our company we're doing that through our street scooter. But that needs to be further supported also by digitization. So we see in the market trends like vehicle to grid, where Connecting your vehicle to the power system gives advantages in demand-supply balancing, but also in frequency balancing. And also trends like blockchain, which would enable smart contract, but also it will take out the transaction cost. So you will have much more intermittent charging and discharging, and further integration of the energy system. So probably the integration, the coupling between logistics sector and the power sector is an area where we will see much more developments.